Have you ever been called selfish by your own family just because you dared to say no? I got an email, no greeting, no context, just a PDF titled Asset Reassignment, Immediate Attention. My name was in it once. She'll comply given the emotional incentive. Turns out they'd created a family stability fund using my inherited assets, stocks, a Hudson cottage, even my grandmother's wedding brooch, without my consent. The plan was simple: absorb, rename, erase. But here's what they didn't know. I learned to read shareholder reports at 12. My grandmother taught me that clarity is a form of wealth, so I moved first. In 72 hours, I formed an irrevocable trust, legally airtight, untouchable. Then I found their draft proposals on a flash drive still plugged in at the estate. One comment read, "She'll resist. Just remind her it's for Logan. She always folds." Not this time, if you're watching this thinking, that would never happen to me. Think again. Because if you don't protect your story, someone else will rewrite it without you in the frame. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I thought it was a late congratulations email. The subject line had that stiff, formal tone my father preferred: asset reassignment, immediate attention. My thumb hovered above the trackpad, heart already beating a little faster, not with excitement, but with something I couldn't name just yet. Rain tapped at the window like a metronome, steady and insistent. The gray light in my apartment turned everything dull. My oatmeal-colored couch, the stack of unopened mail, the lukewarm coffee going stale beside my laptop. Luna, my tabby, had curled herself into a cinnamon roll by the space heater, blissfully unaware that my day had just tilted off-center. I clicked the email. No greeting, no punctuation, just a link to a PDF. I opened it. $8,900. Breakdown. Catering for 60 pours. $3,200. Photographer. Premium package. 10100. Upstate NY guesthouse rental. $2,400. Floral decor. Whitmore blue theme. $950. Security deposit. Miscellaneous fees. $1,250. At the bottom, Whitmore Family Stability Fund. Initial allocation plan. And just beneath that, in smaller font, prepared in advance of Logan Whitmore's engagement announcement. My name appeared once, in passing, a line that read, "She's expected to comply given the emotional incentive." No signature, just the Whitmore crest watermark and the date, April 3rd. I sat back, fingers numb against the ceramic mug I hadn't realized I'd picked up. The tea was cold, mint, slightly bitter now, like it had waited too long to be useful. I didn't feel insulted, not yet. I felt studied. Grandma Eleanor once told me, they'll dress betrayal in family language, watch their words, and the timing. She'd said it while folding linen napkins, as if the lesson needed to be absorbed alongside the scent of starch and lemon oil. That was her way. Truth disguised as chores. Warnings tucked into the edges of ordinary life. The cursor blinked on the screen like it knew what I was thinking. What kind of family sends a financial restructuring plan as a surprise? I reached for my phone. Sophie picked up on the second ring. "Please tell me you're calling about happy hour and not another spreadsheet from your mother." "I just got something," I said. She heard it in my voice. "You okay?" "It's a proposal, a family stability fund. They're pooling assets." "Yours?" "Some. The cottage in Hudson, the vintage stock Eleanor left me, and the Hartley diamonds." Sophie let out a low whistle. "They're not pooling, they're absorbing." That word stuck. Absorbing, like a sponge or a debt collector. "And they say I'll comply," I added, voice quieter now. "They always assume you will, but they forget what you've seen." I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Rain streaked down the glass in soft rivulets. I used to find it calming. Now it just looked like the sky was sighing. You remember when Eleanor taught me how to read shareholder reports? I asked. Of course. You were what, 12? You used a pink highlighter and kept asking why dividends weren't like birthday money. She said clarity was its own form of wealth. And she was right. I pulled open the drawer by the stove. The folder wasn't there, just takeout menus and a single screwdriver. I checked under the sink next. Nothing. Finally, in the linen closet, tucked behind a box of allergy meds and one lonely candle, I found it. A manila envelope labeled in Eleanor's perfect cursive, for Olivia, keep separate. Inside were old shareholder summaries, margin notes in her slanted hand, a sticky note still clinging to one corner. This portfolio is power. Use it when silence no longer protects. I read it twice. Then I went back to the laptop, reopened the PDF, scrolled to the very bottom. There, in faint gray font, not meant to be read but definitely not deleted, was an internal comment bubble. Olivia will resist. Just remind her it's for Logan. She always folds. Always. Not sometimes. Not likely. Always. The heat that crept up my neck wasn't rage. Not yet. It was recognition of a pattern, of a role I hadn't consented to but had played all the same. I closed the laptop. Luna stretched, blinked slowly, then returned to her nap. I stood still in the kitchen, surrounded by the quiet hum of a life carefully built to be untouched by family drama. And yet, there it was, leaking in through the inbox like rain through old window seals. I didn't feel angry, yet. Just awake. It was a LinkedIn post. Of course it was. I was scanning job listings for a friend, fingers idle, brain even idler, when Logan's smirking face popped into my feed, bathed in gold light, framed by a string of fairy bulbs and flanked by two men in matching linen blazers. The caption read, "Grateful to the ones who made this possible. Whitmore Launch, Legacy in Motion, founding sponsors." I tapped the photo. The image expanded, and there it was, a banner behind him. "Thank you to our founding sponsors." Logan's name naturally was the largest. Below it, I saw Charles and Marianne, their names followed by titles, Strategic Advisor, Fund Chair. Then, Olivia Whitmore, Silent Contributor. The cursor trembled under my finger. Not donor, not investor, contributor. Silent. The word stung more than I expected. It wasn't the money, I'd already grieved that. It was the rewriting, the repackaging. Like I'd agreed to be the ghost that built the stage. I texted Sophie. She replied in less than a minute, "Do you want to see it for yourself?" An hour later, I was behind the wheel, heading north out of Manhattan. The late May sun filtered through the windshield, but I didn't roll the windows down. Too much breeze made the silence feel crowded. I just kept driving, counting down the exits until I reached the old estate. The Whitmore house in Westchester always looked like it belonged in a magazine. Columns, hedges, a driveway too long to walk without shoes. I parked down the street, slipped past the catering van, and ducked through the garden gate Eleanor had once painted lavender. They hadn't changed the garden much. Golden lights hung between the maple trees. Tables draped in cream linen circled the yard, each topped with wildflower arrangements and tiny cards that read, "Legacy deserves celebration." A jazz trio played near the pool, the sound soft and deliberate. People clinked glasses of rosé, biting into tiny tomato tartlets, and murmured names like they were stock tickers. No one noticed me. That's the thing about being written out of a script. You become invisible, and sometimes that's useful. I moved along the path toward the house, heels silent against the flagstone. At the side entrance, a catering assistant brushed past me with a tray of panna cotta. I stepped inside. The hallway smelled like lemon polish and money. My coat caught on a corner of a framed photo, and I turned to adjust it. That's when I saw the reflection. It was me, but not quite. The hallway mirror had been hung opposite a sepia-toned photo. Eleanor and Logan side by side, laughing at something I couldn't see. Except in the frame, only he remained. She was cropped, just enough that someone unfamiliar wouldn't even notice, just enough to change the story. I walked down the corridor until I reached the den. A clipboard lay on a table near the entrance, beside a vase of peonies. Breakdown of contributions, upstate property transfer, Whitmore Holdings Trust, launch fund, jewelry appraisal, brooch, Esther 1947, Logan Hart preservation display, equity reassignment O. Whitmore portfolio, closed FY21, liquidity support. I stared at the last line. They used Eleanor's wedding brooch, the one she wore when she eloped with my grandfather against her parents' wishes, the one she let me hold once, as a child, carefully, reverently, with both hands. Footsteps approached. Olivia. Marianne's voice was as crisp as her pearls. You could have RSVP'd. I turned slowly. Did Eleanor RSVP to this too? I asked. Her smile froze at the edges. This event is about looking forward, darling. Logan is the chosen one, I said softly. I've heard. She blinked. That's not what I'm not here for explanations. Her brows lifted. Then why come? Good question. I didn't answer it. Because maybe I didn't know yet. Maybe I came to see how far they'd go. Or maybe I came because ghosts need to walk through their stories to set them down. I moved past her, back through the archway that opened onto the patio. The crowd had gathered near the makeshift stage. Logan stood at the center, hand raised, a glass of champagne catching the sunset. His voice boomed through the outdoor speakers. To the ones who believed in me, he said, even when I didn't believe in myself. Laughter, light applause, then, to my family, for investing in this dream, even when I didn't deserve it. I saw Charles nod. Marianne dabbed her eyes. A woman beside them murmured something like, so well spoken. I stood still. It wasn't even the lie that stung. It was how practiced they all were, as if this version of the truth had already replaced the old one in their minds, as if I'd never existed in the lineage of belief. No one saw me slip back into the hall. The flash drive sat beside the printer in Charles's study, still plugged in, maybe forgotten, maybe left like bait. Either way, it held a copy of the Family Stability Proposal Draft and 4 related memos, including one marked Private Non-Disclosed Entities. I pocketed it calmly. On my way out, I passed the mirror again. This time, I stopped. I looked at myself. No makeup, hair damp from the mist, eyes too tired to be angry. But there I was, not silent, not cropped out. I reached the car just as twilight dipped into blue. The catering truck backed out of the drive, headlights swinging. From inside the house, the jazz trio started up again. I didn't start the engine right away. I opened the glove compartment, slid the flash drive in, and closed it carefully. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't. There was a strange clarity that settled in once I accepted what they'd done. It was like that last click of a lock you didn't know had been open this whole time. Rachel Lynn's office sat high above Fifth Avenue, all glass walls and sharp lines, the kind of place where no one raised their voice, and every second of silence felt like a deliberate decision. She greeted me without small talk, only a curt nod and a gesture toward the seat across from her. I liked her instantly. I slid the flash drive across the desk. Everything's there. The PDF from the fund proposal, internal notes, signature logs, dates, IP addresses. She clicked through it in silence. Her eyes didn't narrow, but something behind them shifted, like a door closing firmly. I've seen cleaner jobs from amateur scammers, she finally said, but this is bold, sloppy in the way only confident people get when they think you won't look. They didn't think I'd look, I said. They thought I'd fold. She nodded. And now? I pulled a crisp folder from my tote and laid it flat on the table. Now, I want to build something they can't touch. Rachel skimmed the documents. Proof of ownership, digital timestamps, Eleanor's handwritten estate annotations. When she reached the asset list, she let out a short breath. You want to transfer all of this into a trust. Irrevocable. Yes. You know what that means. I do. She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. Once it's done, not even you can reverse it, but neither can they. That was the point. An hour later, I was standing in a chilled bank vault downtown, staring at the brushed steel drawer labeled 722. The clerk handed me a pair of cotton gloves and a key. No questions asked, just a quiet nod and a practiced smile. The drawer slid open with a heavy sigh. Inside, a velvet pouch cradled Eleanor's wedding brooch, the one they claimed had been misplaced. There was also a bundle of letters bound with twine, brittle with age, and one envelope sealed in red wax. I broke the seal. The letter inside was short. 4 lines, Eleanor's handwriting steady and exact. If they come for what's not theirs, don't cry. Draft terms execute quietly, and never confuse kindness with surrender. The edges of the paper trembled between my fingers, though my hands didn't shake. Back in Rachel's office, I signed the last set of documents. Each page another nail in the coffin of their plan. We titled it the Whitmore Legacy Trust. I was the sole grantor and beneficiary. Eleanor's assets, my assets, were now outside their reach. Rachel slid the final folder toward me, her voice quiet but precise. Once we file this, it's done. They'll come looking, of course, but not for what they lost. They'll come for you. I nodded. Let them. We didn't speak for a while after that, just the soft click of her pen against the desk, the hum of the city far below, and the distant whistle of a kettle in the break room. Later that night, I went home and began cleaning house. Not in the literal sense, but in every digital and emotional corner of my life. I deleted the family group thread, blocked their shared cloud account from syncing with my devices, changed every password, shut down the old brokerage login they used to access my holdings. There was no anger, just math. They'd given themselves until Friday to transfer everything. I moved first, 40 hours ahead of schedule. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about air, about finally breathing without asking permission. Sophie called once, just after midnight. I let it ring twice before answering. "You okay?" she asked. I looked out the window. Central Park shimmered below like it belonged to someone who still believed in spring. "I'm ready," I said, "for whatever comes next." And I was. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. They thought I'd come back to negotiate. I came back with notarized facts. The driveway crunched beneath the tires of my Camry as I pulled up to the Whitmore estate. The sky hung gray over the stone roof, and the maples along the perimeter had begun to shed their crimson leaves, scattering like confetti from a party no one enjoyed. The last time I'd been here, I was still hoping for decency. This time, I brought contracts. I stepped into the library right on time, 4 p.m., as stated in the email I had sent with a subject line that left no room for ambiguity. Family financial meeting, required attendance. The room smelled like floor polish and old scotch. Mahogany shelves lined every wall, stuffed with unread leather-bound books and ornamental globes. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth, doing little to warm the mood. Marianne stood by the drinks tray, swirling something amber in a crystal glass. "Tea?" she offered, her voice lined with pleasantries but no warmth. "I won't be staying long," I replied, laying the leather folder down on the table between us. "And we won't be discussing feelings today. Just facts." Logan was slouched on the love seat, scrolling his phone, his expression flicking between defensive boredom and performative offense. Charles stood behind him like a sentry, arms crossed, face unreadable except for the thin line of his mouth. I opened the folder and began. "This," I said, sliding out the first document, "is the formation certificate for the Whitmore Legacy Trust. Irrevocable, legally binding, executed under federal trust law. I am sole grantor and beneficiary. This document supersedes all verbal agreements or proposals, like the Family Stability Fund you attempted to register with my name on it without consent. Charles barely blinked. Intent overrides ink, Olivia. Your grandmother wanted harmony, not litigation. Intent doesn't override trust law, I replied, keeping my tone even, and Eleanor knew that, which is why she recorded the original will with both hard copy and digital notarization. Rachel Lynn has those files, by the way. She's on speaker if you'd like clarification. I reached into my coat and placed my phone on the table, already connected to Rachel. Her voice crackled slightly but came through clear. Everything Olivia just stated is accurate. The document trail is intact, time-stamped, and secured. Marianne took a sip of her drink, her fingers trembling slightly. We never meant to exclude you, she said, her eyes softening in that way she used when she wanted to rewrite history. It was just about keeping things balanced. Logan's at a critical point in his journey. I noticed, I said. And I also noticed my stock portfolio, the Catskills property, and Eleanor's wedding brooch, all listed under miscellaneous transfers. Logan finally looked up. You didn't even want that stuff, Olivia. You always hated the estate drama. Grandma knew I could use it to build something. She wanted us to thrive, he added, voice rising. And you think draining her is thriving? I asked, calm as I reached for the last sheet of paper. I slid a small printed quote across the table. It was something Eleanor had framed in her study. Financial freedom is clarity, not escape. There was silence. Then Marianne moved quietly, reaching into her handbag and pulling out an envelope. She slid it across the table like a final offer. Then you should see what happens if you go through with this. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blurry, scanned, Eleanor's familiar looping script, just legible enough to resemble a signature at the bottom. My stomach tightened. For a breathless second, I faltered. Eleanor's handwriting, or something meant to look like it. Rachel's voice came through the speaker again. Olivia! I cleared my throat, folded the paper carefully, and tucked it into my folder without a word. You're really going to do this? Logan said, rising now, suddenly animated. Cut us out? Over what? Principles? No, I replied. Over facts. The room felt colder than it had when I arrived. Charles straightened his cuffs but said nothing. Marianne looked like she wanted to cry but couldn't quite summon the tears. Logan paced once, then slumped back into the love seat. I stood, collected the folder, and nodded toward the fire. Eleanor left the estate to all of us in different ways. You chose to reinterpret that. I chose to protect it. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass of the grandfather clock by the door. Behind me, on the mantel, a faded photo of Eleanor and Logan rested in a silver frame, cropped just right so you'd never know I was standing beside them the day it was taken. Outside, the wind carried more leaves across the lawn. I zipped up my coat and walked back to my car, my heels crunching sharp against the gravel. This time, I wasn't just walking away. And inside my coat pocket, the blurry scan burned like a fuse, waiting for oxygen. I didn't even see the message until lunchtime. It had come in at 7:03 a.m., buried between a client inquiry about renewable investment credits and a spam ad for high-protein yogurt. I clicked it almost absently, one hand still wrapped around my coffee mug. The subject line read, "You should see this." No body text, just a link. I hovered, suspicious. My finger tensed. I didn't click until 40 minutes later when a second message came in, from a client this time. Olivia, saw the article. Are you okay? That's when I opened the link. The headline blared across my screen like a slap. Greedy heiress shuts down family to get $10 a loan. Below it was a photo I hadn't seen in years. Eleanor and me standing side by side at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a charity she quietly funded. I was 16. She was beaming. I looked startled by the camera. The article had quotes, anonymous sources. Family insiders, paragraph after paragraph accusing me of manipulating Eleanor in her final years, of isolating Logan, of hoarding family assets and acting in bad faith. One paragraph attributed a line to Marianne. We only wanted to honor Eleanor's legacy. Olivia turned it into a power grab. By the time I finished reading, my inbox was pulsing. 12 new messages, 4 missed calls. I sat back and stared out the window of my office, where the New York winter blurred everything into shades of gray. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the city had that dry, sharp cold that found its way inside your coat. I closed the laptop. For a moment, the silence in the room felt padded, like the world had taken a step back to see what I'd do. Sophie burst in 20 minutes later. She didn't knock. "You've seen it?" she asked, breath fogging as she tugged off her gloves. I nodded. "It's got Marianne's fingerprints all over it," she said. "And the way they're spinning Eleanor's memory, I could scream." I didn't scream. I didn't cry either. I just stood and walked to the side cabinet, opened the third drawer, and pulled out a manila folder I'd labeled months ago, Legacy Phase 2. Inside were the plans for the Eleanor Whitmore Sustainability Center, an initiative born from a set of documents I'd found in Eleanor's private folders. Designs, mission statements, even old feasibility studies on clean water filtration and energy-efficient housing for rural counties. She'd wanted to build something lasting, something quiet but real. "Get Rachel," I said. Rachel Lynn arrived that evening, calm as snowfall. Her boots tracked no noise on my hardwood floor. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew better. Instead, she laid her laptop on my desk and said, "It's time to flip the narrative." We scheduled a press conference, not flashy, just the right size, with trusted outlets and a clear agenda. Sophie coordinated the guest list. Rachel drafted key talking points. I practiced until my voice no longer trembled on the phrase, "my grandmother's legacy." That morning, I wore Eleanor's brooch, the one they tried to use for Logan's party, now pinned cleanly on my lapel. The room was full but respectful. I walked to the podium, notes in hand, but I didn't look at them. "My grandmother didn't leave me money," I began. "She left me a plan, and I intend to finish it." Behind me, the projector clicked on, cycling through photos of Eleanor at work, installing solar panels, handing out reusable water kits, meeting with young engineers in her tiny kitchen. The Eleanor Whitmore Sustainability Center would be her final act, and I would be its steward. Reporters asked questions. I answered with facts, no emotion, no retaliation. By the end of the week, the narrative had turned. The Times called the center a rare act of inheritance with purpose. Local outlets dug into Eleanor's decades of anonymous philanthropy. A professor from NYU emailed to offer support. A woman from Idaho wrote me a letter. "I never knew her, but your grandmother's ideas remind me of my mother. Thank you for finishing what she started." I was reading that email when Rachel looked up from her phone. "Logan saw the broadcast," she said quietly. "He's asking if you'll take his call." I didn't respond to Rachel right away. Logan's name hung in the air like a thread pulled taut. For so long, I had been waiting for an apology, or even acknowledgement, and now that it was offered, part of me didn't trust the silence that preceded it. "I'm not ready," I finally said, my voice soft. He didn't just stay silent. He let them rewrite Eleanor. Rachel nodded. She didn't press. Instead, she turned the topic back to logistics. "We'll need to finalize board appointments for the center." The announcement caught more attention than expected. 3 environmental coalitions have already reached out. Sophie poked her head in just then, holding up her phone. "You're trending on Twitter," she said. #legacy. Done right. I laughed for the first time in days. Not a loud laugh, but the kind that loosened something in my chest. Eleanor would have hated that. "Probably," Sophie said, "but she'd be proud. You didn't fight dirty. You just built better." That night, I stayed late in the office. The city outside felt hushed under snow. I reread Eleanor's last handwritten note, tucked inside the vault. sealed in that neat wax with her initials. The ink had faded slightly, but her words hadn't. Never fight a fire with fire, my girl. Fight it with water and build green where the ash falls. I folded the letter and placed it inside the framed photo of her and me, now back on my desk, no longer hidden. Let them call me cold. Let them write their stories. I had built something that would outlive their noise. And tomorrow I'd decide whether to pick up Logan's call, not because he asked, but because I finally had a choice. The first key turned in the lock with a soft click. No crowd, no press, just me and what I built. The hinges creaked gently as the door opened. Sunlight spilled across the pine floors, touching every corner of the refurbished barn like a quiet blessing. The scent of cedar and old earth clung to the beams above, freshly cleaned but still holding decades of stories. I stepped inside slowly, my boots echoing against the wood. Where horse stalls once stood, rows of open shelving now held gardening guides, sustainable living kits, and hand-labeled jars of seeds. The Eleanor Whitmore Sustainability Center wasn't grand or glossy. It was grounded. It was honest, just like she was. Near the front door hung a wooden plaque carved with the words Eleanor wrote on the back of a recipe card once. Financial freedom is clarity, not escape. It was the only thing I ever framed without glass, because some truths don't need protecting. They just need witnessing. The studio space to the right had high windows and a long table made of reclaimed oak. It would be used for community workshops, journaling retreats, maybe even after-school tutoring. There was paint on one wall already, bright blue handprints left by the volunteers who helped finish construction last fall. I had only just set my bag down when I heard the tires on gravel. Logan's rental car looked absurdly shiny next to the split-rail fence. He stepped out in a wool coat too thin for the spring wind and walked toward me with hesitant steps, as if the land might reject him. "I thought it'd be locked," he said quietly. "It was," I answered, then nodded toward the path. "But the key works." We stood in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "You didn't have to protect me, Olivia. Not after everything." I looked at him carefully. There was no calculation in his eyes this time, just the flicker of someone learning how to look inward. "I didn't protect you," I said. "I protected what she built." Logan's gaze dropped. "Thank you anyway." When he left, he didn't ask for money or favors, just offered a handshake firm and honest. I took it. That afternoon, Edward arrived. He didn't knock, just let the screen door slam lightly behind him as he stepped inside, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. His smile came slowly, the way it always had when he saw Eleanor's legacy in motion. We sat on the porch, watching the breeze tug at the young saplings lining the path. "She'd be proud," he said. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the quiet speak. The wind chimes Eleanor had hung years ago stirred gently, filling the pause between us with the softest kind of music. "I almost forgot," he said, reaching into his coat. "She gave this to me once, told me to hold it until the place felt finished." It was a photo, worn around the edges, of Eleanor and me kneeling in the dirt beside a tiny tree. I must have been 10. My hands were filthy, but I was smiling, really smiling. So was she. That night, I listened to a voicemail from Marianne. Her voice, always too smooth, crackled slightly at the edge. "We heard about the center. We'd like to come visit, if that's okay." I deleted it without hesitation, not out of anger, but out of peace. The next morning, a group of third graders came for the center's soft opening. One girl, all freckles and curiosity, tugged on my sleeve. "Was this really your grandma's place?" I knelt beside her and pointed to the tree in the middle of the garden. "It was her dream," I said. "Now it's mine." She smiled, and I saw a flicker of Eleanor's spirit in that wide-eyed wonder. As the kids scattered across the grass, exploring the garden beds and peeking into tool sheds, I stood by the door and listened, not to applause or press clippings, but to laughter, wind, and life. The key turned once more as I stepped outside. This time, I didn't look back. The breeze carried the sound of the old wind chime, just as it had when I was a child, soft, steady, and full of memory. I didn't need applause or reconciliation. What I needed was already here, in the garden we planted, in the space we opened, and in the echoes of the woman who taught me where true wealth lives. Sometimes, the hardest kind of love is the one that draws a boundary. But love, when it's real, doesn't hide in silence or guilt. It speaks in actions, in protection, and in legacy. If we listen closely, the people who came before us still guide our steps, even if they're no longer at our side. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear it. Tell me what you've held on to or let go of in the name of family. Sometimes sharing our stories is the gentlest way to keep them alive, and if this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories about resilience and hope. Thanks for watching.